I gotta get something off my chest, and it's this big plate of bacon. Don't worry, I'm not going soft on you. I'm not telling you that you can't be eating your bacon, you can't be eating your cheese. I just want to be able to clear the air a little bit and explain how much saturated fat is enough on a ketogenic diet. Look, I will come right out and say saturated fat is not bad on keto. Like, there is so much evidence that demonstrates that like the ketogenic diet doesn't necessarily affect your cholesterol levels the way that people think, and I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole too much. So I want to get that out on the open right now. But what we do have to look at is what saturated fat brings to the table in a positive way. And it's not a ton. Like, we don't get a ton of nutritional benefit coming from saturated fat. Is it bad on a keto diet? No. Does it taste delicious? Heck yes, it does. But like, how much should we be getting in? Let's break it down. After this video, can you please check out Thrive Market down below in the description? Online membership-based grocery store. You can sort on their site by keto. So all the foods that they have within that category are gonna work on keto. Then they get delivered directly to your doorstep. You can stuff your pantry with them. I get pretty much all my keto pantry staples through Thrive Market, so I don't have to go to the grocery store and spend a bunch of money. Ends up being much more cost effective for me because I don't go to the store, and their prices are ultra competitive. So there is a link down below in the description. They have been a supporter and sponsor in this channel for going on like 4 years now. They are amazing. And that link will also get you 25% off a Thrive membership plus a free gift when you use it. So big thank you to Thrive Market, and thanks to you for continuing to support the brands that keep this channel going. I think the big elephant in the room is that saturated fat is calorically dense. And if we end up consuming so much of it, we end up taking potential calories away from things that have more nutritional value. And if we just keep it in the ecosystem of fats for a minute, the more saturated fat that we consume, the less potential like monounsaturated fats that we can get, the less polyunsaturated fats that we can get that actually have a stronger metabolic benefit. So saturated fat is good for like myelination and for the nerves and things like that. We need a certain amount, but above a certain point, we don't get additional benefit. Whereas with things like oleic acid from olive oil and from avocado oil and things like obviously omega-3s that we get from fish oil, really there is no like tolerable upper intake. Like, we get exponential amounts of benefit that are dose dependent with how much we take in. So we have a limiting factor if we just load up on a ton of saturated fat. So that's why it's really, really important to look at. But also, it doesn't make sense to have a lion's share of your diet's calories coming from saturated fat from even like a natural or evolutionary standpoint. Look at how keto would work. Keto is a starvation mechanism, okay? It is, period. Even if you're eating more calories, what you are implying within your body is that you're deficient in glucose, so it has to upregulate ketone formation, which is a survival mechanism. So in the human body, in biology, our body sees that we are quote unquote starving, which is why it's upregulating so many different longevity processes, things that are amazing. But if you put us into a real world scenario where we would traditionally be in a ketogenic state, we would be out in the woods and we would be starving, right? Well, or we would not be able to forage and get plants and nuts and seeds because maybe it's winter time. So we'd be left with just meat, right? Well, if we were hunting and we were eating wild meat has very low saturated fat content. In fact, wild meat in general is 3 to 4 times less fat than today's domesticated meat. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we would normally be consuming higher amounts of protein and more amounts of polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats coming from that meat, and quite a small amount of saturated fat. Because the only saturated fat that we might be getting would be from some of the organ tissue, from some of the brain and things like that. But the lion's share of the calories we would consume would be coming from the protein and from the poly and monounsaturated fats, okay? That doesn't mean that you'd be getting a bunch of olive oil and things like that to make, play devil's advocate. But the point is that let's keep the saturated fat within the realms of what our body is adjusted to being able to metabolize even in a ketogenic state, which looks like about 20 to 30% of your fat calories. That is still a perfectly good number and gives you plenty of wiggle room to be able to have a plethora of bacon, gives you plenty of wiggle room to have your cheeses, but you're not loading your calories and balancing out and getting rid of the polyunsaturated fats. Also, the good and the bad, saturated fats are very satiating. So if you have a given meal that has so much saturated fat in it, well, that takes away from being able to get the non-starchy veggies that you really should be getting in for multiple different reasons, including glucose tolerance, gut diversity, brain, whatever. So I know I sound like I'm kind of poo-pooing it a little bit, but don't get me wrong. I mean, I eat a crud load of eggs, a crud load of bacon, and I feel like my brain works pretty good and my body looks decent as a result. But I'm also practical with getting that balance in. Now, another thing that I would suggest, 20 to 30% of your daily fat calories, not total calories, coming from saturated fat. So that means if you were, let's just hypothetically say you are eating, okay, simple math here, 100 grams of fat a day. 30 grams of it could come from saturated fat. That's a lot. That's a whole lot. Like an egg is going to have a few grams. Like you could still have a smorgasbord of eggs and bacon and stuff. The other thing that I want you to remember is that you want to allocate that to the morning as much as you can. So if you really enjoy your saturated fats, have them in the morning, because your body is going to have the machinery to process it. There's a study published in the journal BMC Medical Genomics that I've referenced I don't know how many hundred times before, but that talks about the fact that we have more gene expression and storage genes that are capable of allowing us to utilize fat better in the morning and not store it as much. So stack your saturated fat towards the morning. It's the perfect time to eat eggs and bacon and sausage and cheese. And then throughout the rest of the day, ease off the saturated fat. So realistically, you're probably having more than 100 grams of fat a day. You're probably more in the ballpark of, like me, I'm like between like 150-ish grams of fat. So 20 to 30% of that, I'm looking at 30 to 50 grams of saturated fat. That's gonna be 3-4 eggs, that's gonna be 4 or 5 slices of bacon on top of that, some avocado, a good amount of cheese. You tell me that you're deprived of saturated fat. What I don't want you to do is add a ton of saturated fat additionally throughout the rest of the day, because it's taking away from the nutritional value of what else you would get. So don't hate me. I'm telling you, you can have it. I just want you to do it right so you don't miss out on the benefits and you can do this for a long time. I'll see you tomorrow.